There's all sorts of names for the malicious software now. I mean, everyone probably knows about viruses. We've been dealing with those since the dawn of computing, practically. But the big thing is malware, adware, spyware, browser hacking, ransomware, and then at the end, everything is about replication. So when that virus or malware or spyware takes over your computer, it actually has a life of its own. It can re-engineer itself practically and redeploy it out to the internet, to another computer. So a lot of the bottom ones like adware, spyware, browser hijacking tend to be more annoying than anything. It's more advertising popping up in your face, and they're more annoyances than malicious, as opposed to ransomware. Email is still the number one way that viruses and malware and all that get into networks. As you can see here, I got a few samples. We got, payroll logins is acting like it's a payroll, or FedEx, or we've seen all sorts of things, Apple account IDs that have come in. Then you'll see the odd one where it's my resume, where it's a zip file, and you open that and it infects your computer. So those are the big things. A lot of the other ones like the ADP and FedEx, those are links that you click on that take you to a site that looks like FedEx, but if you look at the address bar, it isn't FedEx. It's like I've seen it as simple as a Google spreadsheet that's basically collecting your username and password. So the big one that was about 2 years ago was the FBI Money Pack. This one was actually slightly annoying. What it would do is it would get into your computer and it would actually pop up a huge web page that you couldn't close. So it would be sitting there and you'd have to phone in to get, quote, tech support, and you would be able to pay the money and get back on your computer. This one's more of an annoyance one. Actually, it's pretty easy to get around. Shutting down your computer and usually logging back in with a different account, you can get around this one. So this one's kind of like, I call it malware version 1.0, because it was pretty easy to get around, and it really didn't do anything on your computer other than lock you out. The big one that we've seen a lot over the last 2 years is this one. It's called CryptoWall, and it literally has versions. Started out with CryptoWall 1.0 about 3 years ago, and I think we're up to about CryptoWall 4.0 now. And what it does is, once it's on your computer, it literally encrypts every single file on your computer. You can't read anything, and then it pops up this screen, and it gives you a countdown timer to pay Bitcoin. And in this case, I actually dealt with one of these personally with a CEO of a company, where he got this because we thought he was being backed up, because we do a quite rigorous backup, but we found out that he had been keeping a lot of information on a lawsuit he was in the middle of on his PC, and it was the only place that all this data existed. So I ended up having to actually pay the ransom in this case to get his data back, and it honestly felt like walking down a back alley, dropping up a duffel bag, and coming back an hour later, and there was like a password taped to a brick wall. So it honestly felt like that, and it was kind of scary. And I didn't want to use my credit card, so I had to go to the store and get a pay as you go credit card and all that type of stuff. So it was kind of scary and weird, but it worked. And I've even read about accounts where these guys have whole call centers. Like if you can't get your password, that you can phone in, and they're very nice, and they'll take your credit card and give you the password and everything. So it's huge business, these guys with CryptoWall. The other one is a big one, is social engineering, which we've seen a lot of, especially in our realm. Microsoft reps calling to say that you have a virus on your computer. There's actually lots of hilarious stories if you want to look online of people toying with these guys. I've had a call personally. I use a Mac, so it was entertaining that they told me my Windows computer was infected. So I was like, what start menu? What start menu? So anyway, so yeah, so you get these phone calls, and then the other one is like people pretending to be your IT company. Like, this is Joe from whatever help desk or IT company. Can I please have your password? We're pretty crazy about that, even where we are with our customers, is that we usually get them to type the password in, or they know our phone number when we're calling in, or they know our names. And if you really, in my opinion, with those things, call back, hang up and call back the number if you think it's not, something's not up. Social engineering, like once again, the FedEx invoices are kind of another form of social engineering, because they're tricking you. You know, you think you have a package coming, so you're going to log in and see what the tracking number is. And then another one, emails from your IT department wanting to reset your password. We had one customer that had this the other week, where it looked like their password reset when someone had like literally taken it off the internet, re-engineered it, but all it did was post it into a Google spreadsheet. So it would have taken all their passwords for the whole company if people had started clicking on that. But thankfully we were able to catch that in time. The big one that we run into, and I'll admit that I'm as guilty as anyone else because it's hard work, is password reuse. So using the same password on every single website. It's a constant battle, because having to think of a new password for every time you go to create a new account is very painful. So I actually personally use a program called LastPass, and what it does is it actually will generate the password for you and remember the password for you. So that's one big one that I use, just because then you don't have to remember. And they have the apps for iPhone and Android, so if you out and about and you need to get the password, you can just log into that password manager and grab the password. Another big one is 1Password. They're a very big one, and they're very similar to LastPass. Another thing that I actually recommend to people, and actually I was mentioning this to the RBC guy that's doing the other session, is that is multi-factor authentication. If your software, like Dropbox, for example, you can have your usual password, but then there's a system that LastPass lets you use it, and it's called a PIN, multi-factor PIN. And you probably won't be able to see it from here, but what it does is it generates a code every 30 seconds that you can type in with your password. So then that way, if someone does steal your password, they still have to know this 6-digit PIN, and you care a little less that they've like taken your password. So that's multi-factor. So I would recommend to people that turn it on wherever you can, because even if it's just a text message version, because a lot of multi-factor will actually let you text the code to your phone. That's a great way of, at least if someone's trying to hack your account, you're going to know, because that's going to text your phone a code, and then you'll know something's up. I mean, of course, a lot of people recommend, if you're not using a service after a while, to delete the account, but I admit that's very hard. Or sometimes companies go out of business and you can't do that. So definitely using a LastPass or password manager of some sort and keeping your passwords completely different is definitely a very recommended way of going. So this is a relatively new thing for this year, and I was just mentioning to other people, it's kind of funny, I've done this talk to some degree over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's kind of interesting to what things have changed over 4 years that we're talking about today that I would never have dreamed we would have talked about 4 or 5 years ago. So malvertising is a new term in the tech industry, which is that advertising that looks like advertising but isn't advertising. It's malicious advertising, takes you to bad websites, loads up your computer with malware. Which I found it very interesting that this year that malvertising has overtaken porn for web infections. I can tell you 10 years ago, if anyone got a virus, I could probably, without certainty, probably guess you were on a not so good website. So now it's interesting that now that's not so much the case. So here's some examples of hacking or hijacked legitimate ads. So these are ads that are actually real, but what's done is someone's gone into the website and changed the background code to redirect it to a different website. So a lot of these were really big a few months ago, where you know, you got Match.com or LiveDrive, which is a very big backup company, had their banners kind of hijacked, so if you clicked on it, it went to a different site. Hugo Boss on Huffington Post, which is a very large news site. You know, you got like banks and stuff. So it's very interesting that we've run into this. I know that we've hit websites ourselves where they're legitimate websites, but the advertising was bad. So one big stat that came out last week is that 27% of the Alexa 1000 websites were delivering malware via malicious advertisements. And the Alexa 1000 is the top 1000 websites or brands in the world. And that's a very scary stat that 27% of them have some sort of bad advertising on them. So one thing that we've noticed is that malware has become a very big business, like anything. So the life of an Angler server, so Angler is one type of malware virus that has come out recently. And the life of an Angler server is 1 day. So in that 1 day, it compromised 9,000 computers and 3,600 users, but each user paid a ransom of about an average of $300 a day. So this company, if they were doing this on average, would be making $34 million a year, which is pretty impressive by any business standards. So malware has become an extremely lucrative business. So here's some more stats. So this one type of virus is doing 90,000 a day, and 40% of users were getting exploited, and so those are very interesting stats. So how do you protect yourself from these? That's actually a very hard question, I have to admit nowadays. You have to kind of almost go multi-layer to some degree. I've kind of name-dropped some of the antiviruses that I have found over the last 2 years that have been the least compromised. I'll admit that I was a very large AVG fan for years, but they are like Swiss cheese now in my opinion. WebRoot, Kaspersky, and Immunit are actually the three that have the least amount of compromised computers. And I think mostly because, especially WebRoot and Kaspersky, they run what's called a browser add-in that actually tests the link. Like if you go do a Google search, it will actually verify every single link on that Google search to tell you whether it's been compromised or not, because a lot of these now work in real time. So WebRoot and Kaspersky are good at that. I mean, the only downside to running a web add-in is it kind of slows down your browsing a little bit, just because it has to verify all those links. So the nice thing about those is that if it knows there's a link that exists, like a bad advertising, it will actually literally block the link, like make it disappear. The other one that I use personally, even at home, and we deploy this to all our customers, is OpenDNS. You can look up them. What they do, they're kind of similar to WebRoot, but what they do is they analyze all the traffic going in and out of your house, and it's a free service. And if your computer or smartphone or tablet is going to a bad site, it will block that site for you and tell you why. So, and it's a free service. It's very good. I've used it for years, and it's got lots of great features. I actually use it for our own family internally because it does content filtering if you want it to. So like for my kids, for their tablets, it can block them from going to different sites. Another one that's really good for getting rid of malware is anti-malware, which is Malwarebytes. We use that pretty religiously at our office. It's a great way of getting rid of infections, and it's a good way of preventing them in the first place. And then the other one is vigilance. I guess the only thing you can say is that if it feels wrong, you shouldn't probably proceed, or at least find out what's going on if you start getting weird pop-ups or things that are not feeling right, that you're entering your password suddenly in that site. There's actually quite a few interesting, if you Google about malware, there's actually some tests or websites that show you what different websites can look like to that might have infections. Of course, the biggest thing that can save your bacon, so to speak, at the end of the day is backup. It's because any of those infections, if you get hit, if you have a really good backup, the likelihood of you having to pay the ransom is lower, even though you'd be working at restoring your computer, but at least you wouldn't be out, $1,000 or whatever. But this is very interesting. One of the big backup companies online, Backblaze, they did a survey back last year and asking how many times people back up, and the daily people are very low. There's some people that do yearly, some people that do, there's a good chunk that do yearly and a good chunk that don't do it at all. So I would definitely say if there's a way of backing up that you should do that. There's quite a few reasonably priced backup things online, like Crash Plan and all that. So protecting your network at home or at your office, implementing centrally managed patching system, which is a little harder to do as a small business, but definitely keeping your computer up to date and patched up, definitely important. Microsoft releases these things to patch the holes that the bad guys use to break into your computer. Definitely remembering to include all your computer systems, and tablets and phones are definitely in that realm nowadays, more than just your Windows or Mac. So yeah, and then the big one that actually came up the other day, so IoT devices are Internet of Things. So a lot of these smart light switches or smart plugs that come out, actually a lot of people have been buying them, but they, number one, don't change their password, and then they never actually update the software on them. And there was a website in the States that was hacked the other day where it actually overtook a good chunk of these Internet of Things devices, like web switches, and we're doing it's a geeky thing, but they were doing almost a terabyte a second of traffic against a website, just from these type of devices in people's houses. So, which is an amazing thing that a bunch of light switches were bringing down the website of someone. So Bulletproof IT, on our side, we are a fixed fee managed service provider. Just a little plug for ourselves. We do IT between 10 and 200 users. And we basically your internal IT team. We do a lot of, basically we're your IT team. So we're your IT department, so anything that has to do with IT, we are the people that we hope you will phone. So I will take questions if you have any.
What about a Mac? That's a Mac compared to our Windows.
How? I actually have to admit that out of all the ransomware, I have yet to see it on a Mac. But that's a little hard to say that it's better than a Windows, just because the install base is still, minuscule in comparison. Like it's like 10 or 20% compared to Windows, right? So the likelihood of it getting is obviously going to be lower, just because it's. But I mean, on one side, Mac and Linux, they use a different way of operating, so it's a little harder to do some of these things. Yes.
So you said that because fewer people use Macs, they're not targeted as often?
Yes. Basically, that's what it boils down to. I mean, if you're a ransomware provider, you're probably going to go after Windows guys, just because the install base is bigger. You're likely going to get more infections, you're going to make more money. Yes?
Do you find with the Windows 10, is the chances of infection reduced, increased, or all the same?
I would say it's reduced, but of course, again, Windows 7 is still the prevalent operating system that we see out there, so my data points are lower, right? Just because I'd say that compared to, like, just in our networks, we look after about 2,500 machines. I would say 90% of them are still on Windows 7. So that makes it hard to know. Like, I haven't seen it on a Windows 10 machine, but that's just maybe because we've been
that could be
lucky.
probably a cultural thing too, because the people who are jumping to Windows 10 first are probably also the people who are paying more attention to
True.
keep it clean.
Yes, and yes, and I'll admit that software vendors tend to make the newer systems more up to date than the older ones. I mean, Windows 7 is still there, but if you're using anything older than that, I'd be a little scared. Like a Vista, and hopefully you're not on XP. But if you're still on Vista, then yeah, I'd be a little more wary, just because it's on its way out. The same with Mac. I mean, you should. I mean, if you're on a Mac, I would say you should be within the last version or two of operating system. It's free anyways, so it's all good. Any other questions? Yes.
Can you back up your files? If there's a file number,
Yeah.
will that transfer into your backup or is this just your files?
Theoretically, yes, but if your backup software is pretty good, it should have versions, so you should be able to say, like if it did back up today, and you should have a version from like yesterday, right? So you should be able to roll back to a version from yesterday. But yeah, some backup systems don't have that, and if it's just keeping last night's copy, yeah, you'd be in trouble. But I mean, even cloud services like Dropbox and that have versioning, so you can, even if that gets hit, should be able to roll back to like yesterday or the last good day. Yeah.
Do you recommend, like I do iDrive,
Yeah.
but is it better to also do, like, I also have a plug-in,
Yeah.
one that's hooked up to my computer. Am I better off to do both, or am I better off to do, like, I'm trying to find out what you recommend is
Sure.
the most efficient and best
Yeah,
Like,
well.
do you put it on a USB and take it off every day?
Yeah.
To prevent, I guess.
I honestly, more backup is always better. I mean, the more copies you have, you're gonna make sure that when something does go wrong, you'll have somewhere to go. And I mean, local backup to a hard drive is going to be easier to restore than cloud, just because of the speed of internet, right? Just anything. Yeah. So I personally do both. I mean, even in our own businesses, we back up locally and to the cloud at the same time. So it's the better way to go if you can do it. And of course, if you can automate it, like make it do it itself, then you don't have to remember. And that's always the catch with some of these, you know, like why people only back up once a year, because that's when they remember to plug in the USB drive and do whatever they do to back it up, right? So I get that. So, but getting some sort of automation, I mean, almost there's a lot of free software out there that will do backup to USB hard drive, and they'll do it daily. So. Anything else? I'll be up here if you want to talk, so thanks for coming.